you no longer have to sacrifice a child in a vain attempt to control the weather.
Here we go, another Sam Harris. Before we get into this, please click like and subscribe below, and we're going to do this right now.
I mean, this is what's anti-scientific. When your certainty, when your convictions don't scale with your evidence. I mean, I'm actually...
See the guy? See his eyebrows, how they're put together? And his lips are like this, and he's looking down. This dude is not having a good time.
open-minded on the survival of death. I don't know.
You say about reincarnation, that there could even be evidence for it in your book.
Yes, I mean, I can easily tell you what would constitute evidence. I'm not saying this evidence exists, but I mean, I can tell you what would constitute evidence for the truth of Mormonism. It's just not forthcoming.
This isn't. We're not going to get political on this.
No.
And he laughed. He gave in. Uh-oh.
I mean, there are all kinds of scientific things you can say about religion, which religious people tend not to want to hear. I mean, you can say, for instance, that Mormonism is objectively less likely to be true than Christianity. Why can you say this? Because Mormonism is just Christianity plus some rather stupid ideas. I think it's a false fear, the idea that we wouldn't find any reason to build beautiful architecture or paint nice paintings, but for indulging certain religious superstitions. It's just not, I think Feynman once wrote that he was a poor poet who must fall silent when he finds out that the sun is actually a massive sphere of hydrogen fusing into helium. I mean, it's not, the claim is that you have to take something on faith to be creative, and I think it's a product of an argument that you used briefly early on, which is a fallacious one. This idea that the percentages of people who do these great, I think you used it in the connection
in terms of goodness, not in terms of art.
Yeah, in terms of goodness.
Right.
Most people.
Was it not fallacious in goodness? I'm just
well, yeah,
curious.
no, it's fallacious.
Okay.
Most people are doing this good work are doing it for religious reasons. Well, most people, most of the time, have been religious throughout human history. There has been no one else to do the job. This is true.
Yeah.
I mean, most people who have plucked chickens have plucked them while believing in God. That does not mean you need to believe in God to pluck a chicken.
That is.
And there's no corner of the universe that announces certain events as good or bad or right or wrong. We make those judgments. But in doing that, we seem to be broadcasting our preferences onto a reality that is intrinsically value-free. And where do our preferences come from? Where do our notions of right and wrong and good and evil come from? Well, they clearly are the product of apish impulses and social emotions that have been drummed into us by evolution. And then they get modulated by culture. So you take something like sexual jealousy, right, for instance. We come from a long line of primate ancestors that were probably quite covetous of one another, despite the fact that everyone was covered with hair. And this possessiveness gets modulated by culture, and so we have something like the institution of marriage, say. And therefore, from the point of view of science, when you look at a statement like it's wrong to cheat on your spouse, it seems like that statement doesn't really track reality in any deep sense. This is just how apes like us learn to worry when we acquire language.
Right.
It's just conventionally wrong. It can't be really wrong from the point of view of science. This is just an improvisation we're doing on the back of biology.
See, that's interesting. He says it's an improvisation on the back of biology. But what it seems to me is that there's something, these moral truths are reflected in our biology in some way. And there's something about the idea of monogamy that's reflected in our psychology. And the thing is, there's a cultural aspect, but there's also a biological aspect. And the deepest truths are the ones that emerge, are consistent with, and reflect our biology. So you could say it's arbitrary and cultural and it's built on top of, but there's an argument to be made that some of these moral intuitions, this moral judgment, are rooted in our biology. What do you think?
Now, this is where religious people begin to get a little queasy, and I think they should. But they see no alternative, by and large, but to insert the God of Abraham into the clockwork as an invisible arbiter of moral truth. So it's wrong to cheat on your spouse because Yahweh deems that it is so, which is rather odd because in other moods Yahweh is fond of genocide and slavery and human sacrifice. The question is, do you ever have to believe anything on insufficient evidence to explore this terrain, to become truly...
and what is sufficient evidence?
Well, it's the kind of evidence everyone in this room demands on any subject other than religion. I mean, there are nuances here. We can, it takes a lot of work to rise to the standard of scientific evidence, but science is the one language game we are playing where we get really straight and rigorous about what constitutes evidence, where there's a process of peer review, where you have a lot of smart people trying to prove you wrong, and where you actually win points by proving yourself wrong. And this is not what religions are up to. Religions are not falsifiable in this way. And I think you used a phrase that I thought was very useful to frame this. You talked about what used to be and what must be, I think was your phrase. And I think we should reflect on what used to be, because our religions come to us out of a tradition, in many cases, of human sacrifice. I mean, a human sacrifice was virtually a cultural universal. This is where we come from. These are the roots of religion. It's been by no means rare for a child to be born into this world only to find that he's being raised by religious maniacs who think that the best way to keep the sun on its course or to cure the king's venereal disease is to bury or butcher or burn him alive as an offering to an imaginary god. This is not just the Aztecs. This is the ancient Hebrews. Human sacrifice is in the Hebrew Bible, at times condemned, at times tacitly supported, at times demanded, and then, as you know in the story of Abraham, the demand is recanted. We come from generations of people who did not know a damn thing about the causes of events in the world that really concern them: the spread of disease, the failure of crops, the weather. And so religious discourse has changed. We're not sacrificing people happily now, but it has changed by virtue of progress from the outside. I mean, just certain modes of operation are no longer tenable. When you can get a weather report on the evening news, you no longer have to sacrifice a child in a vain attempt to control the weather. You have something like host desecration. Yes. I don't know if you know about this phenomenon that I came across while researching my first.
You see the guy, the guy in the middle. I think he's the moderator for the debate, but it kind of is like a 2v1 right now, or more like just a Sam Harris lecture, because they seem pretty shut down. They don't know what to say. And the guy in the middle, he's like, his eyebrows are up, and he's like, uh-oh. Edit this out.
First book, the communion host is thought to be, once blessed, is thought to actually physically be the body of Jesus, and therefore, if it's mistreated, this is, you can literally, in torturing a cracker, you are torturing the body of Jesus. There are accounts of whole villages purged of Jews who were accused of having mistreated crackers. So the question is, does the belief in the transubstantiation, which is a belief that I would have thought could be rather harmless, have anything to do with the idea that someone can mistreat a cracker and that you should kill him for it? Yes, it does have something to do. It's impossible to believe in the torture of crackers unless you think transubstantiation is a fact. The truth of this fact value issue actually reaches deeper than that, because science has always been in the values business. We simply cannot speak about facts without embracing certain values. It's not that you can't get an ought from an is. You can't get an is without embracing certain oughts.
Yeah.
You can consider the simplest statement of scientific fact. Water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Okay, this seems to be as value-free an utterance as human beings ever make. Okay, but what do we do when someone doubts the truth of this proposition? What if someone comes forward and says, well, I'm sorry, but that's not how I choose to think about water. What if someone says, I'm a biblical chemist and I read in Genesis 1 that God created water before he created light, which in fact it says in Genesis 1. So therefore there were no stars to fuse hydrogen and helium into heavier elements like oxygen. So there would have been no oxygen to put in the water. So God either there's no oxygen in water or God made special oxygen. And I don't believe he did that because that would be biblically inelegant. What could we possibly do with such a person? Okay. All we can do is appeal to scientific values. Okay. And if a person doesn't share those values, the conversation is over. Okay. We must appeal to the value of understanding the world, the value of evidence, in this case, some hundreds of years of evidence in chemistry, the value of logical consistency. Much of what we believe about the world is predicated on the validity of our beliefs about the structure of water. If someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide that proves they should value it?
Damn.
If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you invoke to prove that they should value logic?
A few things to say here. It's easy to exaggerate the problem, and it's easy to overlook very important differences.
This is our chair. So is this one, and this one. Because right now, Canadians need to bank
Among religions. I mean, one problem with a discussion like this is we have a word religion that is a suitcase term. I mean, religion is a word like sport. You know, you have a sport like, Thai boxing, where people get killed and hit in the head with elbows and knees, and then you have a sport like lawn bowling. What is in common between these sports apart from breathing? Not much. And yet they're both sports. And religion is like that. You have a religion like Jainism, which I occasionally reference because it is the one truly nonviolent religion. I mean, the core dogma of Jainism is nonviolence. So that no matter how fanatical you get as a Jain, you are never going to be a Jain suicide bomber. I mean, you simply cannot make sense of it by the lights of Jainism. Now, by no stretch of the imagination is Islam a religion of nonviolence. Islam is a religion of violence in certain circumstances, and it is a great danger to us all that these circumstances can be construed with enough agility as to apply almost anywhere, anytime, to anyone who wants to die for the faith. Now, I'm not saying all Muslims view their religion this way, but there are very few tools within Islam by which to say, oh, Osama bin Laden has completely misconstrued the faith. He has not completely misconstrued the faith. So between Islam and Jainism, we have a range of convictions and behaviors born of them. And the style of discourse that you're using to talk about, again, what religion should be, not what it is, I would argue, just obfuscates this terrain. We have people really killing and dying based on propositions that they are granting credence to, and these beliefs are thriving in a context in which they are immune to criticism. And we are collaborating in that process by not criticizing them publicly, incessantly, relentlessly until we break this spell.
I see. And now another question over here.
So that's very interesting. What I'm hearing there is that Sam Harris is somewhat of an activist, and he has that kind of like, if you're not fighting them, then you're enabling the extremists on the other side doing the horrible thing that they're doing. So that's an interesting observation there. It's damn reasonable though, so good luck disagreeing with him. These two guys and the other people in this compilation were having a hell of a time managing his comebacks and his clever arguments and his reasons. So thank you for watching. Please click like and subscribe below. I'm coming back with more real soon. Thank you very much. My name is Luke.